Hey folks, got another detour here for you. It is the 23rd of June in the morning. Sorry for the echoey noise, but at least my camera quality is better this time. And over the weekend, the United States retaliated against Iran and tried to bomb their nuclear sites, nuclear enrichment sites. Um, and so before that happened, however, during this actual interview that Krystal Ball and Kulinski conducted with Cenk Uygur asked for this conversation. It was kind of to revisit strategy about whether first of all, how do we see MAGAs and like Trump's sort of movement, and how the left, however we describe that, can either work with them or fight with them or do some formation of both. Cenk and Anna on the Young Turks have been wrong, on just like flat out wrong on a lot of these things. Never forget when Cenk was lecturing Francesca Fiorentini, saying that it's crazy talk, the idea that Trump would be rounding up immigrants. And now just look at Los Angeles, where, he's essentially living and has been for a long time. It's a place I'm familiar with as well. Like, it's very, very rich, but I'm not even going to go there with that. Now, on the eve of US involvement in Israel and Iran sort of back and forth conflict that they've been having in early 2025. Well, dear God, now it's in the middle of 2025, speaking in June. And we are now having another opportunity to see how Cenk's strategy is working. And so I encourage folks to check out that video on Kyle Kulinski's channel. The whole thing is very interesting. I'm going to play a good amount, but like a bit of it just here. And the part we're getting into is when Cenk is describing how he believes that MAGA is an anti-establishment movement, just as what he's been doing on the Young Turks and, just as Democrats and a couple of other entities kind of in that atmosphere are also anti-establishment movements as well. So we're going to see how he makes that argument and kind of continues it here. And I'm not going to do that much, pausing and playing. I'm going to try not to, but we'll see what's going on. First of all, for folks who are watching live, hello, good to see you. But anyways, we'll play here.
Right? So now there's a giant full-blown revolt from MAGA against this war. Now, if you're saying, no, I don't see Tucker Carlson, Bannon, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Posobiec, Cernovich, Candace Owens, etc., all of them opposed to the war, but you might not, because a lot of people watch programming that honestly just kind of gives them a misleading sense of what's happening.
Did you see Tucker, Trump saying, Tucker called me to apologize? He said he went too far. Did you see Steve Bannon saying, we're all going to fall in line ultimately? So I'm not talking about, hold on.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the however many million Americans voted for Trump, some of whom are hardcore MAGA, and you will never move them. And I guarantee you, the moment that Trump says, this is the policy, they're going to say, you're right, sir, this is the policy, this is brilliant, and I am on board. Are there independents that can Are there independents that can be moved? Yes. There are two separate questions here. Okay. Number one is we are in hell right now. Like, the level of damage that has been done to this country, done to the world from Trump 2.0 already is astounding. So the number one thing is triage, right? How do we stop?
That's what I'm doing.
How do we stop as much damage as we can? And the track record thus far in the Trump administration is the only time he has been constrained is through the left and liberals banding together and going through the court system and public pressure. That's it. That's all we've seen in this administration. The other question is, how do you win elections? So go ahead and address that, and we can talk about the election piece. But real quick, before you get in, as to the earnestness of this MAGA anti-war movement, put element number 3 up on the screen. Do you know? Tell me, how many Republicans have signed on to the War Powers Resolution?
One.
Is Marjorie Taylor Greene? No. Is Lauren Boebert there? No. One, Thomas Massey, a libertarian who is, ideologically consistent, kind of similar ideologically to Dave Smith. Every other person here is a Democrat. So to the earnestness of this anti-war MAGA coalition and their commitment to blocking war with Iran, here is where the rubber meets the road. You have one Republican who is already at odds with Trump, who is willing to put his name on this war powers resolution. That's it.
So, Krystal, look, I know you don't mean it, but you keep conflating two things. The Republican politicians, including Trump, and the Republican voters, or the people who voted for Trump, okay?
Okay, so that is one piece that I want to dig into, especially because the thing that Cenk is not connecting is that the tail is wagging the dog here. Or actually, the dog is wagging the tail, and the dog is Donald Trump, and the tail of the voters. And I guess in this tired analogy, the spine and the spinal cord system in a dog is the Charlie Kirks, the Tucker Carlsons, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Some of these are Lauren Boebert. Some of these are elected officials. Some of these are formerly elected officials. I guess you'd say Matt Gaetz is one of those, creepily. But if these entities are not able to show pressure to their leaders, and those leaders aren't feeling that pressure, and those leaders are just doing whatever they want to, and they're not even listening to their own staff. Remember, Tulsi Gabbard said we don't have any evidence that Iran is enriching nuclear energy to the point of making nuclear weapons. And Donald Trump basically sided with Benjamin Netanyahu and said, I don't care. They're making nuclear weapons. We're going to stop them. So, yeah, you had a day of that. But like Krystal said in the very beginning of her response, Trump gave a call to Tucker Carlson, and then Trump recalled that call and said, oh, well, I told him that he needs to try to get back onto a TV network, stuff like that. I told him that he needs to cool down with that stuff. And, Tucker Carlson's walking things back. Steve Bannon said ultimately, if people, some people in MAGA might not like that Trump is engaging in this war with Iran, but they're willing to go with him because they trust him no matter what. These are the people that Cenk's have a beer strategy with, is supposed to work on. And again, once you get down to the voters, I think you will have some who peel off, who just hate this idea of foreign wars. It's kind of wild that it would have taken them this long to get here in the first place. But if someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene falls out of line, Marjorie Taylor Greene only has the power that she has in the Republican Party because she's been yes-anding Donald Trump ever since he rose to power within the party. The moment she stops doing that, the moment that money stops flowing and goes to the next Mar-a-Lago-faced congressman or congresswoman who wants to take that role of being Donald Trump's cheerleader and attack dog in the House, many, many people will want to take that role. That's easy money. So that's one thing that Cenk is not getting, that you need to actually show that connection. Otherwise, the point really isn't working. You have all these different stories of people who voted for Trump and or someone they know or someone they rely on for, to make a living, basically, to bring money and to put food on the table. They lost their jobs because of Doge or because Social Security payments were being delayed or mishandled. These people did not really do anything to prevent that from continuing to happen. That's kind of what we're saying here. So yeah, Krystal Ball gave some really good points there, but just to recap what she was saying, she was basically asking, A, how do we triage the damage that Donald Trump is doing right now? And B, how do we win next time, so we can start to fight back against these things and more than just, at least in the House and definitely ideally in the Senate, although that's going to be very, very difficult with the map we have in the future. So yeah, how do we triage? How do we win? And then that last little graphic she showed of the people who hadn't voted for or like who didn't sign on to the War Powers Resolution, or it showed the people who did, but it was meant to illustrate that only one Republican, a libertarian leaning one, was the only one who actually signed on to that bill. No other Republicans would. So that just shows that if you, and the polls actually show that Republican voters don't want to go to war with Iran, or at least they did in the beginning. I think much like what happened during the lead up to the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and much has been happening just in the past like 5 days. There's a great Citations Needed episode about how we speed ran several years of lead up to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars in about 5 days. If you look at things that are happening on cable news, especially on Fox News, even on CNN in response after the Trump announced the missile launches through his press secretary, the Republican Party can very quickly be led, and a lot of centrists and even some liberals can very quickly be drummed up to, okay, we get behind our country when we start to go to war type propaganda, and those numbers can start to buckle a little bit. But if there were proof that the MAGA movement were powerful enough to convince Trump to say like, oh, we are so against war with Iran that if you continue this, then we are not going to support you anymore, which we're even starting to see in some of the polling. And his immigration numbers are going down, his numbers in the economy are fluctuating, all the things he's supposed to be strong on are getting weaker and weaker because people are actually starting to wake up finally. And ultimately, if there were a time to prove Cenk's strategy of appealing to the right wing, it would be right now. And so far, they are falling in line with Donald Trump. That's the thing it doesn't seem like they're getting. So how do we triage? How do we win? And how earnest is MAGA? Let's see how Cenk answers that.
Okay. So are the Republican politicians corrupt? Of course they're corrupt. Are they going to say, hey, Israel, I'll be your bitch and I'll do whatever the hell you want me to do? Of course they are. They're completely owned by Israel. Okay. So AIPAC, et cetera, the warmongers, by the way, let's be honest, is more than half the Democratic Party totally owned by AIPAC? Yes. Right. So I oh my God, oh no, you can't be honest. You have to just say the other side is terrible and our side is angels. No, I'm not going to play that.
Would you
That's
rather?
nonsense.
But would you rather be on the side of the 37 who signed onto the War Powers Resolution,
Krystal,
or the
I am
1?
On the side of the 37. Everything you frame is a straw man. I am on the side of the 37. In fact, Ro Khanna is my top ally. Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna and I had the same.
I talked about this on Power Report as well on the previous one we just did this past Thursday, where Cenk was one of the first people to give Ro Khanna a chance as a Justice Democrat in, media, quote unquote, and did a bunch of rounds and did campaign updates with him and continue to follow up with him in campaign. So to the extent that, we criticize cable news figures for some of their super close connections to politicians, they're talking about policy and riffing with each other and, that sort of thing. That has been recreated for sure for Cenk and Ro Khanna. Now, you have to look at some of the results, and I think both of them have gone, too deep into the side of big tech and crypto and all of that creepy sort of like, crypto libertarian, sometimes fascist money that flows throughout Silicon Valley. At least that's what I've kind of like observed from my opinion, and we can litigate that another time, but we'll continue here. That was just a fun note I found.
37. In fact, Ro Khanna is my top ally. Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna and I had the same exact strategy that you criticized in November when we talked.
That's not true.
You literally put me, and Kyle did the same thing. You guys put me in the same bucket as Bernie and Ro, reaching out to see if we can find agreement on the right.
What else?
Right.
But what else has Bernie done? What else has Bernie done that has been profoundly impactful? The anti-oligarch, the Fight Oligarchy tour, which was an effort to bind together the left and the liberals to protest and to resist this administration, and that has been profoundly more impactful.
You're having a conversation with a person who isn't here.
Did the Pentagon budget get cut? Just tell me that. What's the Pentagon budget? Did it get cut?
You've now asked me 28 questions.
Did
Let
Don
me answer
Jr.
them.
did he do what?
She's asked like, and that's why I kept track. She's asked like 4 questions, really 2 questions and like 2 or 3 follow-ups because Cenk isn't really getting to the point. Now, Cenk automatically gets defensive whenever I don't think we're trying to call him a Democrat. I think he does legitimately agree with, I do think he's legitimately anti-war. He goes really hard on Piers Morgan on those panels, for example, right? That's a whole separate thing for a different time. However, the way that Cenk's strategy is of appealing to the right, of, sometimes, in some instances, like trying to, on a base level, argue for trans people, but not really going, I don't even saying far enough, but I'm, arguing with evidence for to protect rights that the right wing is actually trying to take away. We just saw the Supreme Court case that was handed down that affirms the ability for cisgender kids to have gender affirming care, but strips the rights away for trans kids to get gender affirming care. In both cases, it's with doctors and through evidence-based medical research and advice and second opinions and third opinions and what is best for that transgender teenager. So there's much better ways to argue for these things. Cenk is not arguing for these things. Sometimes he's even taking like more centrist or right-wing positions for these things and is being called out for it. And he's not even being really called out as being a Republican. But this is, again, back to the strategy. But he gets very defensive about it. And this is where I'm like, okay, we all knew that he would get defensive and just like shut down and not listen before. But this is a continuing pattern here where something deeper seems to be happening here is something that I was noticing. So let's continue.
Whatever with the generals, did that work out?
All right, guys, look, I came on here because, look, you're generally fair. So you asked me 28 questions, and then let me answer them. So, and stop framing it as if I'm a different person. You keep making all these assumptions about who I am. Oh, are you on the Republican side or the Democrat?
I'm literally citing things that you said, Cenk. Like, I played your clip of what you said.
Christ,
turn to the camera.
Okay,
hey, tell me if I'm wrong.
Krystal,
This
Krystal,
specifically.
I'm right here. I'm right here. Can I talk for myself instead of you?
You specifically held on the Pentagon budget.
At this point.
That was in the earlier part of the clip that I didn't play. Again, you can watch the full thing. But Cenk is on Krystal Ball and Friends in like December when all this stuff was going down again and said that, there's enough people in MAGA who hate, America's bloated military budget. And so they're going to cut the Pentagon budget. They didn't cut the Pentagon budget. And we're going to see Cenk's strategic error, but we're also in getting there going to see some of the other issues I think are also at play here.
Borderline lying about me in every framing of every question. Can I
How am I lying?
A human being named
How am I
Cenk
lying?
Uygur
Tell me
actually
how I'm
answer
lying.
your questions instead of you framing
Tell me how I'm lying,
as a
Cenk.
person that doesn't exist?
Cenk,
okay?
I played the clip of you talking, so tell me how I'm lying.
Okay. All right. So now, of all your questions, you have this fantasy land that Trump was like, oh, the left thinks Abrego Garcia's, I've treated him wrong. I surrender, left. Come on, what planet do you live on? No, the courts are not left or right. The courts have held. I'm thrilled that the courts have held. And it was so important for the courts to hold. So if they didn't hold on that, he was going to have unlimited authoritarian power. And we are against that, no matter how many times people try to pretend that we're on the side of Trump. Listen to what I am actually saying, and you will see this every day on the Young Turks. I am against Trump, totally, okay? Now, okay, yes, but why do you love Trump will be the next question. Okay.
Did I ask that? Cenk,
okay,
talk about a straw man. I mean, you're making up stuff I never said. Come
What's
on.
the point of coming on here if I can't answer your
Cenk,
questions?
I'm giving you plenty of time to answer, brother. You're making up stuff about me. I didn't say that.
Okay,
so you want to talk about straw men? You're inventing things on the spot.
You guys, it's a mistake. So okay, now when you're talking about the Pentagon cuts, You think that I thought, oh my God, Elon's such a good guy. And Trump's such a good guy, even though I've spoken out against them at every single turn. And then I magically thought, oh, I bet they become liberals overnight, progressives overnight. No, you put out the Pentagon thing so that they're stuck either way. That's why Bernie and Roe joined me, because either they cut the Pentagon, we go, yes, mission accomplished. We got a tiny, tiny amount accomplished during a Trump reign, which seemed impossible. Or they don't cut the Pentagon and they add to it. And then we all come out, as I did and Bernie and Roe did, and go, see, we told you. They're hypocrites. The leaders of your party never intended to cut the Pentagon. MAGA, they were lying to you.
For a second.
Now, Krystal,
So that's the thing we've all been missing. Once they don't cut the Pentagon budget, and you try to reach out to them and have a beer with them, and they say all these different things. They're like, yeah, I can agree that we probably spend too much money on our military. We should probably shrink it and not, be so bloated and be overseas everywhere and be such an assertive force in other countries' affairs and other spheres of influence. And that might be better for our country because then we could better reinvest at home. Maybe you could convince them to say that, even at a conference or, even off air, if having a beer with them is the classic thing that Cenk keeps going for. But what about what they do after that? What about when they leave and they're like, okay, well, that was fun. That was interesting. Okay, now let's get back to actually, effing things up. It's it's kind of insane because the "we'll prove them as hypocrites" thing should have been disproven as a strategy by the first Trump administration. I mean, don't get me wrong, me and Hassan and so a couple others after that made a lot of videos about on Facebook about the hypocrisy of right-wing talking heads like Tommy Lauren and Ben Shapiro and PragerU. There's this whole different cottage industry that was kind of created after that, and it still, continues to be a backbone of a lot of left-wing political media commentary, right? So you should know that, pointing out hypocrisy at best maybe gets you some views, but Trump wouldn't have won the second time, or really even the first time, if he didn't have a lot of people who were less about principle in the right wing and MAGA movement and that entire Republican coalition that got him elected twice. But the fact that they are very transactional, not based on ethics or morals. They're like, okay, if I get my back scratched, then I can deal with this annoying thing on the other side as long as I, get my cut, as long as whatever I wanted actually happens. So, man, this is the fact that this is his gotcha. This is what you're not seeing, and it's some of the most naive shit. Like, I criticized Kyle Kulinski about this same stuff, and he's actually a little bit lucky because this happened and it was kind of less visible. But I was calling out Kyle Kulinski as hard as I have been Cenk and Anna over the past several months, because he was doing this trick, putting trans people under the bus, trying to get on Joe Rogan's show, trying to agree with him on different things and making videos about him and gargling his balls during the entire time. And I was saying that this is, bad coalitionally, and it's bad strategy, and it's not going to work. And then he sicked his, guys at the Vanguard to come and make videos about me. They've since taken down to make me seem like I'm the crazy person, like I'm the one who's not being civil and, not being respectful, as though these political points that end up translating into rights being given or taken away, people being snatched off the streets, etc. Even Kyle Kulinski, who's about to jump in, maybe in this part of the video that we'll play, although maybe not, but he has said, and he said this on a Majority Report interview shortly after Trump got elected the second time in 2024, that he's done playing that game of trying to appeal to right wingers to think that they're reasonable or can be reasoned with. And instead, he's going to assert that the things he believes in, left wing principles, common sense principles, rather, are better for the country. And he's not going to give an inch, in his phrase. Those are the difference in strategies. Cenk is living in some sort of fantasy land if he thinks it's anything else or could be anything else.
MAGA Care, Cenk? Did that work?
So
Did MAGA
yes,
care?
they do care.
No, they don't.
No, okay, Krystal.
I've seen zero pushback on the Pentagon budget. Let me just say, because I let you go on for a little while.
Oh, I know.
There
God
were
forbid I got to answer one or
there
two
were
questions. Go
two.
ahead.
There were two tactics that were floated by me and by you in our conversation. Okay, you said, I think it's great that Elon's responding to me, Don Jr.'s responding to me. Like we have more of a chance. No, you said we have more of a chance with these guys to cut the Pentagon budget than we don't. And I said, nothing good's going to come out of this. And so the important thing to do is to resist the project outright, because we don't want a bunch of the richest man on the planet running our government. And so we saw how this played out.
Yeah,
the Pentagon. Hold on. The Pentagon did not get cut. And actually, what happened is all of the liberal and left organizing against Tesla, against the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, against Elon directly, tanked his popularity to the point that Trump felt he was a political liability and the whole project had to be scrapped. So the tactic of let's work with them and try to cut the Pentagon budget failed. The tactic of let's resist this project outright and make the case and make Elon himself politically toxic succeeded.
So, Krystal, we do live in two different worlds. It's fascinating to see. It's amazing to see. So, no.
It's amazing that Cenk just now said that they are living in different fantasy worlds, because he said it, not me. Cenk said that they're living in two worlds. Just that what Krystal said was crystal clear, and what Cenk said was just, not correct. It is a reflection of him believing, like sniffing his own farts too much, getting too high in his own supply. But like it's kind of not sinister, but just like sad that he's not aware of what he's doing, and aware of the way that he just seems to have like no self-awareness, no willing to have self-awareness. And I think other people have said this in the past, like Kyle said in the past, like Cenk has said, Kyle said in the past, Sam said in the past that, sometimes it's a little bit charming how he just like gets very like head on onto something. But this is just so wrong and so provably untrue, even if you take it in the most like credible way possible. It was leftists and liberals who were bullying Elon Musk, who ended up getting people to understand that he was bad, to get people to say like, oh, he bullies his daughter, he is a huckster, he is someone who scams people, he is someone who says he's about waste, fraud, and abuse, but he gets rid of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, who are about getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. They were fantastically efficient in the way they ran. For every dollar they got, it was multiples higher, like 20, probably more dollars they're able to return back to consumers who have been wronged by people in the private sector. And now Elon Musk has sold those parts of the government to the private sector for parts. That's pretty much what I had said during that whole thing. Anyways, let's see if this plays a little bit better.
Saying cut the Pentagon worked. Why did it work? Because they cut the Pentagon, they magically became progressives overnight? No, it worked because it showed and highlighted their hypocrisy, that they weren't going to cut the Pentagon. And now I get it, guys. Especially if you're in the audience, you're not seeing it. I get it, and I'm not saying that as an insult. You're not seeing it.
So you won because the Pentagon budget went up, even though you thought that the Pentagon budget would get cut.
Can I finish? Okay. So the reason
I love how Mr. Interruptions is kind of annoyed by being interrupted. That's very rich. I love that.
You're not seeing it is because you're not engaging with MAGA, and that's okay. And you don't want to engage with MAGA. I got it.
Do you know who I am? Do you know the show I host?
I don't know if you know who you are.
Who are you talking to right now?
Okay,
I host
all
a
right.
show with Sagar and Jetty and Emily
So,
Jasinski every day.
Okay, so Krystal,
No
are
one
you
in this
saying-
room talks more to MAGA
So-
than I do, okay?
Yeah, okay, but okay, so are you saying that none of the MAGA MAGA voters were thrilled that they added to the Pentagon? Is that what you're saying?
They don't give a shit
I'm
because
saying-
Trump did it.
Elon and
Yeah,
Trump,
no, you guys are wrong.
Elon
They
and
didn't
Trump
like
and
that at
Don
all.
Jr., Cenk, lied to you from the beginning when they
course
pretended
they
like there
did.
was even a 1% chance of it. So when people told you at the time, though, resist them outright and point out that they're frauds.
Okay,
Don't
so
pretend like
this
maybe
is
they'll
so
cut it.
stupid.
That was kind of the
You
point.
guys have a totally ridiculous, all right, let me not be insulting. We disagree on strategy, okay?
Exactly. Anyone who disagrees on strategy with them is stupid. And it's okay. Like they're the ones who are like saying it, and they're saying it behind their backs. They can barely stop themselves from saying it in their fronts. All right, because you can have a different strategy when it comes to how you would interact with someone on the street, or you're talking in a one-on-one conversation. But when you're talking on one of these shows where they have painted you day in and day out, and people you have in your coalition, people who are your friends, your family, your neighbors, your loved ones, and these are shows that have painted your people as bigoted and just like, subhuman in some cases. You've got to, maybe you do it respectfully, maybe you do it viciously, but you've got to show how stupid and idiotic those right-wing opinions are. Then you can quibble about, this thing and that other thing. Like, that is the strategy. That is the way to go. That is how, like, when Charlie Kirk went on Gavin Newsom's podcast, that could have gone much better for Gavin Newsom if Gavin didn't start the show by saying, "Oh, it's such a shame that my son couldn't be here because he has to go to school, but he's such a big fan of you," which is such a big like mask off tell that I think so many people have pointed out that is an indication that there should be some parenting going on. And then Charlie Kirk is able to respond with, "Well, you closed all the schools for COVID. You couldn't keep your son out for one day to see me." And so it didn't help him. It didn't prove his point. It didn't help with anything he was trying to do. It ultimately backfired stupendously, rather, like amazingly. And so if you're going to go on these shows and capitulate early, then they're going to claim that win. They're going to parade your skull in the streets of their thing because they've been ranting about you or making clips about you and saying that you're stupid and you're dumb and the points you're making are stupid and the people you're defending are stupid or dumb or whatever. And for you to come there and say, okay, you know what, we can find some places to agree. Maybe some of the people, maybe you're right. Maybe some of the things I agree with are, the people in my coalition are dumb. Like it's so much bashing of people on your side. It's like, oh, they're doing the divide. Right wingers can say, oh, they're doing the divide for us already. Now we can conquer. That's why it's a bad strategy. And yes, it's stupid. I have no chill. So I don't mind just calling it like I see it. And if you want to call one of my opinions or strategies stupid, then we can talk it out. I don't mind some, like stronger language. Honestly, that's totally fine. But this is just stupid.
Okay?
Definitely,
So,
yes.
okay, yeah. This whole idea that you're making a difference because Donald Trump is listening to the left, I can't believe you guys think that. That sounds totally detached from reality.
I'll make that case in a minute.
Why is Elon Musk out? Because people burn Tesla cars? I mean, Krystal, you said that in the intro. Are you serious? No, Elon's out because his policies were always deeply unpopular. No one wanted those cuts.
Yeah,
Deep
and who
MAGA
pressed that
wanted
case?
them, and they're in La La Land.
Who pressed in liberals
in the street.
Joe Rogan hosted him on his podcast to pump him up.
Guys,
Joe Rogan,
guys,
think about, but Cenk, think about this. Think about this.
Unbelievable straw man.
No.
Hold on, can I just finish?
Let me just finish my thought here, okay? Rogan hosted Zuckerberg and Andreessen to attack the CFPB.
Of course he did.
To gut and attack the
CFPB. Bernie
CFPB.
Sanders progressive overnight?
No,
Are
but
you insane? No, guys.
Are you insane? You were the one who apparently thought that. Cenk,
no, but
if anything is going to be populist, hold on, Cenk. Let me finish a thought. If anything, if the populist right stands for anything, you would think it would be an anti-scam bureau that is wildly effective. But no, and actually stood up against debanking conservatives. But no, What did Rogan do? And what did they cheer for with Elon with the chainsaw? Completely gutting not only the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Trump gutting the National Labor Relations Board, but them defenestrating the ability of this government to enforce white collar crime at all. Did MAGA care? No, they didn't. The only people that held them to account were left and liberals who organized against that, and yes, successfully made Elon so toxic that he ultimately crashed out of the administration. That's what happened.
Amazing point. And last thing that I would also add to that, the whole chainsaw thing was a total rip off of Javier Milei in Argentina, where similar austerity measures, similar cutting of things that people relied on for their government, similar successive social services, similar economic issues that followed, similar hardening of crypto and entry of crypto into the bones of the society, which is something that largely only benefited early crypto holders and the very rich who were able to pump it up and use these things for harder to trace transactions around the world. This, MAGA was not against any of that. No one was standing up for that. The only people who were the left. The only people who were making the case were the left. And that was getting moderates. That was getting centrists. That was getting MSNBC watching liberals to protest, to actions and demonstrations. That was getting them to, build coalitions. That was getting them to do important work that, Jenkins is best intended with like Wolfpack and Justice Democrats, which, he started with Kyle Kulinski. That's what's supposed to be about, that actual grassroots energy, not this, oh, I know what's best for you and we're going to talk down and my solution is going to be great and is going to protect everyone, which is like, I think something that he says later on in the interview here. I'm not going to play the whole thing. I think this is pretty much where I'm going to end it, but like, yeah, I think I just got to note how I'm glad that Krystal and Kyle are now going harder against people like Joe Rogan and calling out the whitewashing of right-wing, crap that they do. I'm glad they're finally doing that. I'm glad Kyle is doing it specifically because I was getting on him for doing that. But the reason why I keep bringing this up is because it's important to publicly admit when you're wrong and try to make up for it in your reporting, in the way you analyze the news, especially when you are a growing channel. Because I remember when I was on that warpath and there were a lot of people who were even in Kyle's comment section saying, stop writing Joe Rogan, like no one cares, like this is a really like weird take, like it was echoing things that I was saying. And so it was an opinion that was held, it was an opinion that was resonated. And, I was complaining, other people were noticing his channel was stagnating at the time. After this election, and after he decides, actually, I'm kidding, I'm going to go hard in the paint against this as a strategy, guess whose channel has been soaring and doing well? Kyle's. Guess which has been suffering? The Young Turks. And again, I think the damage report, I think indisputable. I think folks on Rebel HQ, JR Jackson, there's a number of good folks on the network who are still there who like generally are further and further away from some of these issues, like opinions that Cenk and Anna have that are clearly retrograde. I made a similar video on Anna before, but Cenk, like, I don't know how to describe this. Is it cognitive decline? Is it like, is it so stubborn and so much of an ego that he can't really fight back against how he's thinking about these things or how he's coming off? Like, I don't know here. Like, I want to try not to be mean, but he has been such a jerk to a number of people, especially a number of people who have, look up to him at different times, from Hassan to Emma, people, former colleagues and things like that who have been around there. You can even see it in that video where he's famous for going off on that USA magazine with Michael Schur next to him. And Michael Schur mutters under his mouth, like, it's impossible to talk to you like this, Cenk. it's something that's kind of always been there, but now is at this point where it's at like peak unreasonableness when he used to be the most reasonable man in America. And so, yeah, it's very ridiculous. It is such a supreme ego that you need to listen to your audience. You know, your audience may not be right. He has this sort of, a lot of this comes from how he was the Young Turks were generally supportive of Obama because he was running on much more of an aspirational campaign than what he ultimately governed as. And when TYT was pointing out that difference between the aspirational campaign and the relatively, moderate to right-wing sort of governance, Citibank took it gave Barack Obama a list of recommended officials to include in his cabinet, and Obama basically picked every single one that was on that list. So there were definitely certain issues that were there, but when they did that, there are people who just liked Obama so much they hated the fact that Cenk was criticizing Obama or the Democrats at all, and so they peeled off right there. And so I think that was one of many formative moments for Cenk, where he thinks that, okay, well, even if my audience and I disagree, I should even if my audience and I disagree, I should just go with my gut and I'll be right. This is actually, that can be true. I think audience capture is an important thing. And if you have a good instinct, there are times you should make your case. But you should also, especially in those times, because usually people cultivate, and if they grow to that point, they get smart audiences. I think I have an incredibly smart audience as well. Shout out to all of y'all in the comment section right now who are watching this live version. I'll cut out when I was on mute afterwards. But to that point, when you and your audience are in some sort of disagreement, you should, put your cases out there and then let time decide. And time has shown, again, I don't have time to pull up the Francesca clip where he says that, people getting rounded up is crazy talk. There's a whole bunch of other bangers in that 2-hour debate, which is many debates with Cenk where he's talking for a long period of time, which is very exhausting, which is maybe another reason why the Young Turks main show is not really doing that well. But there are many times where Cenk's strategy has been proven not well, and his response is to, condescend downwards, not even downwards, but just condescend in all directions, really, and say that, oh no, they're the righteous ones and they're the correct ones, and they have talents and skills and knowledge that no one else has. Versus no, they're going out on a limb here, and every single day they prove to be more and more wrong, and every single day they continue to be complete fucking babies about it. We can make comments about how it's I have had loved ones who regress as they age, and sometimes that's anger, and sometimes that's uncontrolled emotion or flashbacks or bad memories. Or just not able to reason with facts or information. And it happens in different ways and it happens at different ages. And it's a really sad thing. I'm not saying Cenk has dementia, but we're getting to object permanence levels of baby brain when it comes to some of the things that Cenk and Anna not only are refusing to reckon with, but they're refusing to even, look at evidence to the contrary and adjust, which is, ultimately, I can say a lot about their personalities. I can say a lot about how they've acted towards people on camera, off camera, etc. But ultimately, if they're going to be people who people go to as news sources, as people you should trust their instinct and eye to read news and consume news. And sorry, I don't have the sound clip right here.
A news show, and that is what happened in the news.
If you want to trust someone who's able to do something like that, then if they're not able to admit they're wrong, they're obviously wrong like this. I mean, they are becoming cable news hosts after all then, because you can do that sort of thing if you're on CNN and you have a built-in audience, but that doesn't mean that particular audience, is helpful as far as how the system goes, as far as how we have cable news watching liberals who sometimes mean well, but then become roadblocks and other things like, oh, well, maybe abolish ICE is a little bit too strong of a phrasing, as they would have said in 2019 or 2020, when again, abolish ICE is paying dividends in 2025. So yeah, like this strategy just continues to not work. Jumbo Jack in chat is saying, Cenk told viewers to snitch on protesters to authority. I haven't seen that, so I can't confirm that. But if that's true, God, that's awful. Anyways, I think I'm going to end it there. Thank you all for listening and watching and making it through some of the technical issues that I've been having on my mobile setup. Still getting stuff moved around, so things should be a little more stable soon. So thank you for doing all that. Thank you to all the YouTube channel members, lot to name, Twitch channel members on syndicate23.co. Lots of content to get through. I'll be indoors this summer because if it's going to be this hot out all the time, then can't do it. And until next time, cheers. And remember that the power is always within you. Keep connected and plugged into your communities, because it'll be very easy to tell when people aren't doing that, and they will make takes like what Cenk was talking about, and they will never, ever sort of like back down from them. So being plugged in with your communities, getting involved however you can, in whatever ways you can, that will just help ground you in what politics looks like versus how people are reacting on Twitter to different things. Anyways, thank you very much. Cheers.